In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the Design tab of your Bubble editor. As you can see, you're given a blank canvas. This is where you will design the front-end interfaces that your users will interact with throughout your application. The way that it works is you'll choose an element from the left-hand side. Let's say we select the button, and then you'll click and drag it on the page to draw it onto your canvas. From there, you'll see the property window come up so that you can edit any appearance settings. Depending on the element that you've chosen, you're going to get different settings available to you. So for example, with the button, I have a field here to enter in the label of my button, so I can call it submit. And then I can also apply different styles for this button. I do have control over the styles within the Styles tab, so I can edit those there. Or I can remove a style and edit the appearance properties of this button specifically with these settings here. So I can change the font style, the size, the color of the button, the background color of the button, right? So that color is for the text itself. You've got a lot of controls, roundness, borders, shadows. And again, this is a context sensitive window. So depending on the type of element, you're going to see different settings here. Just as an example, I'm going to choose a very different element like the map, right? So with maps, we're not working with background colors or anything like that, but we are working with addresses, zoom levels, markers, right? I can swap out the image of the marker to customize that further. So this appearance tab will change based on what you're working with. We do have two other tabs to work with as well. We have the Layout tab and the Conditional tab. Layout is where you'll work with Bubble's responsive settings. Now, a quick note on the responsive engine. As of mid-2022, we are in a transition period between two different responsive engines. Right now, the default engine is going to be the old engine. Any new applications will be automatically assigned to that old engine. And you'll have to manually upgrade individual pages to the new engine. And you'll know that those pages are available to upgrade when you see this icon next to them, right? So the page that I'm on right now, the Sandbox page, does not have that icon because I have already upgraded this page. And I know as well that I'm on the new engine because of the order of my tabs: appearance, then layout, then conditional. Now, if I go to another page that has not been upgraded yet, it's still on the existing engine, you'll see that I have this button here where I can do my upgrade, but also within the property editors, I have a different order of tabs: appearance, then conditional, then transitions. The concept of layout settings wasn't really necessary for the old engine, and so that wasn't there before. Right now, if you're ready to upgrade to the new engine, you'll click on this tab, click on this button here, and Bubble's going to present you with a window to give you a couple of options. So you can have Bubble convert your existing designs to the new responsive engine. It may mean that you need to reconnect a few things, you may need to adjust some of the settings, but it's going to do its best to match your existing layouts. You don't need to have it do that, or you can tell Bubble to copy your page so that you always have a backup on the old engine. I do recommend you do this if you are working with designs that have already been built out. If you're working with a blank page, this window will not show up because there's really nothing to do there. There's nothing to restructure, there's nothing to copy. All right, so back to our Sandbox page to take a look at other areas of our Design tab. On the left-hand side, you're going to see all of your visual elements that are available to you broken down by these categories. So visual elements are things like text, button, icon, link, right? You can see them all here. These are things that users will view and are generally clickable. Not all of them are, but generally a visual element is a clickable element that can trigger a workflow. A container is simply an element that can contain other elements. So you can nest elements inside of them. So if I add a group to my page, I can move this button inside of the group. You see how it highlights in red, showing me that I'm about to drop the group inside there. And then I can pick up this group and move it around. Now, the group may look invisible until I hover over it. I can help myself by going to Grid and Borders and Show Element Borders so that I can see all the boundaries of my elements. This is not something that the users will see, right? These borders here. But Bubble is showing me what those boundaries are so that I can, move things around more easily. Repeating groups are other containers that are specifically for working with lists. We have a whole separate lesson on that. Pop-ups are a type of element that will hover over the rest of the page. And with other platforms, you may know this as a modal. But again, it's another type of container that you can put elements inside of as well. Input forms are elements that the user can interact with. So they can type into an input, they can make selections, they can choose things, they can choose a date, they can upload files, right? So those are interactive things where they can create content and you can take the values of those inputs and save them to your database and work with them in really powerful ways. Now I'm going to take a quick look at the layout settings for this page. We are going to go into this deeper in other videos, but just so that you're aware, when you first upgrade your page to responsive, by default, the layout is going to be fixed. Okay, so what that means is what I see is exactly what I'm going to get when I preview this page. If I drag a button here, it is always going to be there. If I drag it over here, it's always going to be there. The moment I change the layout of my page, right? So I'm looking at the property editor right now at the page level, which, by the way, you have a couple of settings here for the page. You can change the title of the page. That's what shows up in the tab. You can change the background color of the whole page itself. You have some SEO settings available to you. And we can also organize our pages into folders. I'll get into that in a moment here. Now, the layout of this page right now is fixed, as I explained. And then we have 3 other layouts available to us. These are all responsive layouts. Okay, so if I change this to a column layout, you're going to see that my button's going to snap to the upper left corner of the page. It is the first element in my column. If I add another button, let's just label this real quick. We'll say button 1. If I add another button, I'm going to copy this with my keyboard, just Control C and then Control V, just like a Word document. Here's another button, right? Let's label this button 2. It is snapping underneath that button. This is the second item in the column. Okay, so if I try to move this button somewhere else, Bubble's just going to snap it back there. This is actually very helpful behavior. So it's not so much that you can freely move things around, but instead things are going to snap in place on a grid for you. The new responsive engine is very much grid based. It's rows and columns and how you distribute things within those rows and columns. And you can mix and match container layout styles within the page. So just because my page is set to a column doesn't mean that everything has to fall within that column. I can also create groups that can position things in a row. So here's an example. I'm going to add a group to my page. So right now that group is the 3rd item in my pages column. And let me give this group a quick background color so that we can see this. And now this group can have its own layout style. And I'm going to set this layout style to a row. All right, so now I'll add some buttons inside of my, my group. Okay, so let's change the color of this button so we can keep them apart from the buttons above. And we'll call this button 3. Okay, and I'm going to create a copy of this button. Now notice how my 4th button positioned itself to the right of button 3. That is because the group itself is set up as a row. So anything I add to a row container is going to stack horizontally as opposed to vertically with the container layout. I'll put a number on this as well. Now, you might be asking, hey, how do we create some spacing between that? Everything is just smushed right next to each other. Well, we can use gap spacing for that sort of thing. So at the page level, under my layout, I can apply gap spacing by clicking on this checkbox, and I can add in, let's say, 20 pixels of spacing. And so Bubble will evenly space everything out 20 pixels apart. I don't have to do things one by one, especially if I'm adding elements to, this column structure later on, right? So if I want to introduce yet another button to my page like this, it pops it in automatically for me. Let me label this button number 6. And with that even spacing, so I don't have to do any other spacing after the fact. As long as the page has that gap spacing, it'll apply. Okay, now what if I wanted to rearrange these items? I have a couple of ways of doing that. For each individual element, I have these position indicators here. So if I want to make button 6 the first element, I'll click on Make First, and it moved it to the top. Or I can shift it down by clicking Next, 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 or Previous, 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 or I can make it last like that, right? So it shifts it around for me. That is one way of, repositioning all of these elements. Another way is to use the elements tree. Now I'll get there in a moment, but this is an interactive area as well where I can drag and drop things around and it will reflect that in my design. So that's very helpful, All right, so now let's just take a quick look back at the layout container settings. So if I go back to my layout page for, or sorry, the page level of my property editor here and change this from a column to row, you'll see how Bubble realigns everything in a row format. And if I change my groups container layout to a column, you see how it shifts it, right? So everything is dictated by the parent container of the elements themselves. Because of this, it's really important to use containers, leverage them as much as possible. You really want to have everything in a container on your page, even if it's just one element, right? So let me change this back to a column. Let's say I have another group here, and I'm going to get rid of these buttons, and we're going to add a 7th button to this group. Now let's say this is the only item inside of my group. I have, a lot of freedom for where this can be positioned, and this might be a good use case for the container layout of align to parent. What align to parent means is that this element is going to be fixed to one of these nonents, right? One of these 9 spaces here. So I can pick this up and I can hover, over the group, and it'll highlight the different nonents. So I can hover over the center and it's perfectly center inside the group, or I can select over here from the property editor to move it around as well, right? So just because it's one element doesn't mean it does not need a group. The containers, the groups, right? Those are very helpful for positioning things, relative to that space. Now in further videos, we will cover more details about widths and more spacing details and paddings and margins and all of that. But this is generally the concept that you will be working with the new responsive engine, is working with your layout settings to create the right positioning and overall wireframes of your page's layouts, all right? Okay, so I'm gonna remove these buttons for now, and we're just gonna take a look at some of our other components on this design tab. So we've already talked about all of our visual elements, which, by the way, if you install plugins, you may introduce new elements to your list. There are a number of element plugins that will extend functionality to your application, so just be mindful of that. Some plugins will add new things here. Now, the elements tree, actually I do need to have some elements here in order to see something on the tree, so let me just add a couple more buttons like this. Oh, and by the way, those groups that I had on the screen, you could also add gap spacing to the groups themselves. Basically anything that's a container and has a layout style can have gap spacing, either in the vertical or horizontal direction. Now, our elements tree shows us all of the elements that we have designed on the page by name, right? So this was my button A, and I can, of course, change the name by just editing this area up here at the top. So let's call this button start, right? The name of the button is different from the label of the button, right? Every element has a name. I could create a map like I had before, and I can call this, map, let's say driver tracking, something like that, right? So that name isn't going to appear anywhere in front of the user. This is an internal label for you to organize your elements. I highly, highly recommend you label your elements as you go, because that's going to keep you organized. You don't want to have elements with the same name, because that's where wires get crossed and you end up triggering the wrong things or creating inaccurate behavior. Okay, so here I've labeled it button start. This one, let's call this button stop, and let's call this one button pause, something like that. All right, so I can see these 3 buttons on my elements tree. You'll notice that as I hover over them, it will show me a preview. Right now, these all look pretty much the same. So I'm going to, how about we make the stop one danger? We make the start one the success, and we'll make pause. Do we have a warning? There we go. Start, stop, and pause. So as I hover over them, they show me a quick preview. This is very handy when you have a very large page with many, many elements. It might not seem obvious now, but the more help you can give yourself to find things quickly, the more efficient your development is going to go. So labeling things as soon as you create them, labeling them literally, and knowing, essentially where they're positioned in your screen is going to be very helpful. So as you saw earlier, I can pick up these buttons and drag them around to reposition them on the page. Sometimes it's easier to do that here than on the screen, especially if you have lots of nested elements that you don't want to accidentally move. You can also nest them inside of groups from the elements tree directly. So I can take this pause button and hover over group A, and it will position it inside of group A, right? And I can move this one as well, above pause, and where did it go? Oh, it's because my group is not set to a responsive setting. So they're sort of layered on top of each other. If I set this to a column as well, now we see them stacked on top of each other like that, right? I can move it out, move this one out, and it will reflect that. The elements tree also has another view here where we only show hideable. What that means is if you have any elements that are hidden by default, then you can see those elements from this view. I personally don't use this very much, but it can be helpful if you're trying to locate an element that you know is hidden by default. So for example, this green button, let's say I don't want it to be visible when the page is first loaded. Under the layout tab here, I can uncheck this. And so this is now a hidden by default button. The only way that it can become visible is through a workflow or with a condition, right? So if I uncheck this, I will see everything. But if I check the box, I only see the items that have been marked as not visible on page load. All right, and then this eye icon is just toggling the visibility on and off for you in the editor only. This has no effect on behavior for your front-end users. This is just to help you see things if you need to isolate things out, okay? Now, this little search box here will help you find any elements to choose from. Again, if you're working with lots of plugins, this list could get a bit lengthy, and so a search can help you find those things. So if I, search video, then it will find that for me directly, or if I type in input, it will filter things by that word. So that's very handy. You also have a very similar search up at the top to find the elements that you have added to your page by name, right? And it'll generally show you everything in the hierarchy of your page. So sandbox is the name of the page, and then we have our, it's going to group it by element type. So all of our groups will show, then all of our buttons. And also as I hover over everything, it shows me a preview of those elements. Now the cool thing is when I click on one of these here, Bubble's going to take me to the element and pull up the property editor for it directly. Same thing if I click on something on the left-hand elements tree, right? These little shortcuts to getting to your elements as quickly as possible is very handy. One thing that I forgot about this elements tree is that you can right-click on these elements and you have a couple of options there to copy and paste, layer them front to back, delete them, and so on. Now, the rest of the items here in the toolbar are for more just kind of editing tools and visual tools to help you design things more easily. So with this edit window here, you have basically all of your right-click options. So if I go to an element and right-click it, here are all the different things that I can do with it just quickly here on the screen, and we'll see a lot of that same stuff here in this edit window. Anything that's not possible is, as you can see, going to be faded out. So for example, I can take these three buttons. I'm just going to hold down my shift key to multi-select as I click through all three of them. And then I will right click and maybe group them in a row container. So this is going to create a group automatically and set the layout style to row for me. So group in a row, and there we have our group with all three buttons right there, left to right. All right, your help window is going to show you a couple of Bubble tutorials. You actually have a shortcuts list if you're one that likes to work a lot with keyboard shortcuts. And here is also how you can send in a bug report to Bubble if you run into any issues. Okay, now over on the right hand side at the top toolbar, we have these controls here, grids and borders and arrange, are very helpful for distribution and working with your canvas. So if you come from a design background, you might be familiar with having a grid actually displayed in the background of your page. Again, this is not something your users will see, but it's just to help you with your positioning. Now again, the new responsive behavior does a lot of this heavy lifting for you. You do not have to count pixels and make sure that everything is evenly distributed. These layout styles and spacing settings are going to do a lot of that for you, but nonetheless, you still have these here. You can create different sized gutters, you can color code things, and you have a number of different tools to help you with your designs. So for example, you see how as I hover over all of my elements, we've got these red lines showing me all these distances that are relative to each other. That's because I have this turned on here. Let's move over to the arrange. This is something that with the new responsive engine, you're likely not going to be using this quite as much compared to a fixed layout where you need to be more responsible for evenly distributing, aligning things, centering things, and so on. You've of course got your undo and redo buttons. This search magnifying glass will allow you to search your entire application. So let's say I wanted to search anywhere that is using a button. I could do that. I could say search by element type and button, and if I click search, it's going to show me every single place in my entire application that I have a button. Right? I have 46 places in my app right now. It'll show me the name of the button, the page or the reusable element that the button is in. And if I were to click on this here, so for example, if I click on button account, it's going to take me directly to that page, which was my dashboard page, and it highlighted the button there. So that's very handy for finding things in your application. I just showed you the element type, but there's many different ways of searching. You can search by database fields, by workflow actions. Very handy, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot or clean up things in your application. This drop down here, development, is your deployment window and your version history window. So you have the ability to create save points. This is basically creating bookmarks in your development. It doesn't publish anything. It's just a way to say, hey, at this date and time, I started work on my dashboard page. In case you ever want to revert to that point in time, it's helpful for that sort of thing. So if you click on history here, you'll see a list. I don't have one right now, but you'll see a list of all of your previous deployments. And this is also how you can revert back to a previous point in time. Keep in mind that the plan that you're on will dictate how far back you can go. This is, of course, also where you actually deploy your application. So when you click on this, Bubble's not going to let me because I have a couple of issues that I need to resolve first, but it'll pull up a window for you to type in your deployment description, and then you can publish it to live. All right, and then your preview button here is how you preview your page that you're designing. So if you just click this standalone, it's going to open up the page in a separate tab like this, and this is what your user will see, right? This is a way for you to preview it. I'll let that load for a second there, but notice how if I hover and I don't click on it, I have a couple of other ways to preview the application. These are safe modes that will remove any third-party code that you may have added to your app via plugins or via some custom HTML that you might have added. That is more for troubleshooting to help and make sure that you're not creating any conflicts or any bugs due to external code. All right, so that way you can isolate things. So here's my preview. You can see in the tab there, my page is listed there. Again, that's because my page is written in the page title, and I only see these buttons because my green button, wherever it is, it's in one of my groups, it's still marked as hidden by default. Okay, you can get to your Bubble account details with this icon up in the very upper right corner. And lastly, this issue checker is going to be very important for you as you develop to make sure that you're setting everything up properly. So Bubble will flag anything that has not been set up correctly. If you're missing something, if there was a required field that needed to be filled in, then it will call it out here. And similar to the search box window, you'll be able to select, click on that item, and Bubble will take you right to where the issue is. Get in the habit of keeping this number low. It's normal to have issues as you're developing, as things are under construction, but you certainly don't want this to get to a very high number because issues are there for a reason. You know, you want to make sure things are being built out properly, and that will help you with your testing as well, make sure that everything is accurate. There is one thing that I actually forgot, just remembered right now, is your page drop-down list, of course. So this is where you can manage all of your pages. You can create new pages from here, right? This will pull up a new window. I can type in a page name. I can actually clone from an existing page, or I can just go to a page here. You see this delete icon. You can delete pages. You can also delete pages from the property window itself when you're on the page by clicking on this button right there. And you can create folders for your pages. So here I can create a folder, let's say main app, main app, or let's say test pages, right, is my folder. And a folder is just a filtered view of your pages. So right now I'm on my test pages folder and I don't have anything in there. But let's say I want to move my sandbox page to that folder. I can go down to the property editor like this, test pages, and now I see Sandbox there. Or I can deselect the folder and I see everything again. If I were to delete the folder like this, it's not going to delete the page, okay? So you're safe to, remove those folders. It's just going to remove that filtered view. Unfortunately, you can't rename folders, so if you mess up there, you're going to have to recreate it. But here you can choose and or create folders from there. All right, so that was an overview of your design tab and all the tools that you have available to you to help you with your designs and your layouts. Definitely get your hands on this. Don't be afraid to break anything. This is something that you want to get comfortable with so you can understand what behaviors are going to happen when you add everything and you adjust the layout settings. All right, everyone, we'll see you in the next video.